So now I'd love to introduce Tucker Stein. I had a dream. I took a little nap before I started here because I didn't get very much sleep. And in my dream, I was late and I was running through whosever house I was in, trying to find my shirt to put on. And I could hear Tucker Stein introducing Chaitra down there. I'm like, oh, I'm late. Anyway, I'm not late. I wasn't late. I did wake up in a shock though. But Tucker Stein is going to wake you up because what he's known for is helping you build your personal brand. His topic is own your narrative, personal brand building, but he's a brand architect, a leadership coach. He's got 25 plus year coaching people and entrepreneurs and business to build that brand. He's an amazing human being doing great things in the world, and he helps a lot of people get TED Talks. So welcome, Tucker. Nice to see you.
You too, Patty. I don't think I've ever had an introduction before with a dream. So that's a first.
There you go. And Tucker, I wanted to ask you, so, when you think about your career, right, what was surprising to you? What happened that was unexpected or surprising?
I was smiling at our fireside chat because between the political science and the English major, even though I was a marketing major and I do stuff that's related to the marketing field, what I studied in school and what I spent almost 15 years in, I'm not doing today. So there is this concept you can reinvent after 40. So follow whatever it is that you need to follow, but it can't happen after the age of 40.
Well, I can't wait to learn from you about brand. I always learn something cool. So take it away, Tucker. Thanks so much for being.
Thanks for the introduction, Patty. Hello, everyone. Good to see all of you, a lot of you again. I'm super excited to be here. I wanted to share a couple things. One is give yourself permission to drop the analytical hat, the I need to take notes hat. I want you to invest the next 20, 25 minutes or so just specifically being in your creative brain. And I want to talk a little bit about how we can look at our narrative differently. And the reason why this is so important right now specifically is, how often do we hear something that's new? And it's like, okay, ESG, NT, I have to learn something new. Oh my gosh, it's overwhelming. Here I go again. I have to start over. Reset your mind to be able to some opportunity for me to change my story. It's really good to keep things new. It's really good to keep things relevant and timely. So I want you to think about today, not necessarily as ESG being this big, scary, audacious 3-letter acronym, but allow it to be an opportunity for you to change your story. Ideas and concepts we can think about how we integrate ESG into our lives, personally and professionally, but also even more importantly, how do we connect with others using our own narrative in a way that's going to allow us to be experts and leaders in the ESG field for our organizations. Whether you're a founder, whether you're an executive, it doesn't matter. All of these principles apply. All right, Alyssa, let's go ahead and move forward. All right, so today, real quick, and we're going to cover about the topics we hear a lot about and just putting some more definition around it is thought leadership. Then developing our purpose brand statement. I know some of you have been through the Rock Your Pitch exercise before. We're going to look at it slightly differently today, but also in the context of what that's going to lead towards in building your narrative. And then ultimately, what is an architecture that you can take with you to develop a narrative, whether it's a 2-minute pitch, it's a 5-minute power talk that you have to give at a board meeting, or maybe it's a 45-minute lecture, conference, keynote, whatever it is. The same architecture applies all the way through. So we'll look at that briefly today. All right, let's keep going. All right, I always, if anyone on my Women in Cloud team know this, I love data points, and I think it's really powerful to understand some data points when we put all of these conceptual things into practice. Mental health, amazing research report every single year. And the one that came out most recently really focused on the pandemic. And it's really important that we look at some of these numbers. 65% of Americans over the last year and a half started looking for a new job. That's a huge amount of individuals. We talked about the Great Resignation, the Great Shift, all of those kinds of global shifts. It's happening. 75% say that they bring stress from home or somewhere in their community outside of the office into the office. My guess is it's probably even higher than that. And I think the one that's most alarming here, only 20% of people actually find purpose or passion in what they're doing. So today I want to use these numbers as a benchmark to think about how can we improve those numbers for others, but also improve those numbers for ourselves. And maybe you fall into one of these. And if you do, I hope this inspires you to think about how you show up a little bit differently. And if you need some support around that, you can always reach out to me through LinkedIn. All right, let's move forward. Thought leadership. This is where I have to put on those 50-year-old glasses. Thought leadership, the traditional definition, and we hear this term a lot, but I wanted you to hear the traditional definition and why I'm going to spin it a little bit. The expression of ideas demonstrates you have an expertise in a particular topic or field. If you think about that, it doesn't sound too attractive. It's like, okay, great, I'm an expert in something, but why is that powerful? Why is that necessary? Alyssa, I want you to go ahead. We're going to play a little bit of a video, and I'm going to help you change the way we look at thought leadership from a perspective of a word that we're going to focus on today. So let's go ahead and roll that for a couple minutes.
When we're laying on our deathbed, you're not going to worry about how much money you had, how much power you had, how much prestige.
Thank you for taking a couple of minutes to listen to that video. And Alyssa, if you wouldn't mind bringing the slides back up. When we think about thought leadership, I want to change the way in which we look at thought leadership. I want to take the analytical part of it, the more technical business definition, and I want to change it for all of us today. Thought leadership, it's the expression of ideas that demonstrates you have more passion than anyone else in a field where your ultimate goal is to create the greatest impact possible. Sounds a lot more interesting and a lot more powerful than just being an expert in a topic. So when you think about what kinds of thought leadership you bring to the table, where you are most utilized, think about the way to measure them by the amount of impact. How are you going to measure impact from that perspective? Let's keep going. So I know you've heard a lot about this quote. I still think it rings true to everything that we do, regardless of what industry we're in. Maya said it best. You know, you've learned that when they forget what you said, they forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. We're going to talk a little bit about how you can use even your ESG narrative as an opportunity to create connection through emotion, through experiences, through storytelling. Next, Alyssa. And then honestly, quick question, what's our greatest tool for growth in human connectivity? We always think about the things that we have to put in our hands, or, what am I really good at, technically speaking? Don't use your hands, use your hearts and your minds. The greatest tool that we have, go ahead, Alyssa, our voice. It's free. We own it. It's us. It's uniquely ours. So rather than letting that be something that we only respond to, let it be something that we lead with. So let's focus on voice. Keep going. One of my favorite quotes, think about this. I use it with my kids all the time, teenagers, you can imagine this. Hafiz said it beautifully. The words you speak become the house you live in. So think about the narrative that you choose for yourself. Is that narrative designed for you, or is that narrative designed for somebody else? Are you purposely giving the passion of what you believe to be true for you, or are you trying to please and give somebody else a narrative they want to hear? So let's think about those words that we speak. Keep going. All right. And what's uniquely to us, if we have our voice, we have our story. And we're really excited. We're in the WIC Lead Accelerator program right now. We just started it a couple of weeks ago. We've got 10 amazing women, and we're focusing a lot on how we're going to be using speaker presence, executive presence, storytelling to create more impact in the industries that we serve, as well as the customers that we serve. And stories create relatability, they create trust, they create connection. And at the end of the day, you'll hear me say this over and over again. You could probably recite it from people that I know well. By an emotion, and we justify with logic. And oftentimes we try to reverse the equation to hope that it works, and it never works the right way. Keep going. So today we're going to focus, one of our exercises is going to be creating that purpose-driven statement. That's that one statement that you can state to yourself that says, I do this for these individuals so they can do whatever they need to do to be successful. That statement becomes one of the most powerful things that you can own to start that narrative. How many times have you been asked, oh, hey, what do you do? And you sit there and you're like, okay, I have to analyze, who am I speaking to? Do I change it for this? And all of a sudden it takes 5 minutes to respond to something that you can respond to in one sentence, regardless of who you're speaking to. So we're going to focus a little bit on starting with that purpose brand statement and then moving forward. Go ahead, Alyssa. All right, let's get into the number one ingredient in purpose. Why we do it is for clarity, right? There's so much to be had in clarity, and that's usually what clouds our ability to create what that purpose looks like. But those other things that come into play, where do I belong? And how do I? The number one thing that I fall or that I come in contact with clients specifically, and their number one thing is, I don't know how to talk about me. It's uncomfortable to talk about me. And I'm always focused on how my role, my responsibilities in the company defines me, not exactly what I think my gifts that I have define me. So we'll look at that today as well. Keep going. And what are those hurdles that we have in developing our purpose-driven statements? Keep going. I love that, by the way. Ashun just said, Wit gave me a voice. That is amazing to hear. Thank you for sharing that. But sometimes there's those roadblocks in finding purpose. Where do I begin? Who am I serving? And what are my real gifts? And oftentimes we feel like this is very self-serving. But at the end of the day, in order for us to actually create the greatest impact, we have to how we as individuals serve before we can serve others. Keep going. So how would your purpose-driven statement create more sustainability and growth for you? Go ahead, Alyssa. I want to share this, this quick case study. For those of you who don't know Allison Felix, she's probably the most decorated track and field, women athlete of all time, probably. In 2017, she had one of the top grossing endorsements from Nike. And she was brought into the Nike organization to focus on empowering women to be more comfortable in their bodies, their athletics. In 2017, she also got pregnant. And 5 months into her pregnancy, when she went to renew her contract had been reduced over half. And she looked at them and said, what is this all about? And Nike's response was, know your place, just keep running. And she was completely dismissed. So instead of them dropping her, she turned around and dropped them. She started her own line of shoes and other apparel. And her tagline, I know my place. And she has become one of those fashion icons, women's empowerment, motivational speaker. And she's really redefined the way that we look at corporate sports apparel and empowerment through athletic. Her whole brand is absolutely taken off. Keep going, Alyssa. All right. So what I will tell you, it's taken me probably 10 years to put this graph together, this diagram. But I think for me, it has to be one of the most powerful tools that I come back to all the time when it comes to narrative, when it comes to story building, when it comes to building out any message that I'm putting together, whether it's personal and professional. And I call it the force, because oftentimes we try to figure out how do we get to that center, which is the purpose ring. Those 4 outer circles actually all work really, really well together. And they come down to passion, mission, calling, and career. So if you look at how all 4 of these intersect, this is a great way to measure where your passion is for you. Passion, if we start in the upper right, you love it and you live it, right? It's not just enough to love, it has to be ingrained in how you live every single day. Allison's a perfect example of that. Then we move down to mission. The tribe that you serve needs to hear it, needs to buy it, needs it to in order to thrive. So you love it and live it, and your tribe needs it. Then we keep going to the calling, and all of a sudden, what you do and you're passionate about, you're rewarded for it, right? You're rewarded for a career in which you get paid to do something that you really love to do. And on top of that, what makes the career solidified is that you have the gifts that you bring every single day to make that a reality. So if you think about these 4 circles of purpose, think about where you have the most passion in what you do, and then how do those 4 elements work into that? So take some time to think about that. Not today, but I encourage you to listen to this and take a photo of that. If we can at some point, maybe we can send this out as a tool or post it in the digital network. This is a really, really powerful tool to use when thinking about it. It's also a really good tool to bring if you're the head of a team, if you're a C-suite, whoever you are, to bring this in front of an organization or group of people to think about how we, innovate, how we creative problem solving. It's a really good tool to have. Okay, keep going, Lisa. All right, I'm going to finish with a couple of bootcamp exercises because I know we're a little bit short on time. I want to be respectful of that so we can get to that networking moving on. But these bootcamp exercises you can be thinking about right now, but I want these to just be an appetizer to what you do for yourself. To be able to use these as entrees at some point, whether it's over this weekend, over the next week or two. Allow these to be really, really great exercises for you to think differently. Now's even the most incredible time to do this, because as we're talking about ESG as something new, this new way of thinking may help accelerate that concept for you and what you do for your organization. All right, let's move into the first exercise. And like I said, this was really about how do we determine what that initial purpose-driven statement looks like. If you've done Rock Your Pitch before, you'll see something similar to this. But what I'd like you to do is take out a piece of paper. This is where the creativity comes into play. And I want you to just put these 5 questions on a piece of paper, or if you want, just take a picture of the screen. And think about these 5 questions in this order. What am I passionate about? Now think about, when you think about passion, it's okay to think about it personally. It's okay to think about it professionally. I'm purposely not putting any parameters on your purpose platform worksheet. No parameters here. Because sometimes you'll find that what you're passionate about outside of work still can be a part of the passion within the organization. Second, who am I serving? It's not enough to say that I serve people or companies or I serve. It can't be so broad, because as we know, when we try to be everything to everyone, I didn't say that as a recovering people pleaser, we end up being nothing to no one. So focus on being something to someone. Your ability to actually go and cast a wider net starts with going deep and then casting a wider net. If you just cast out the wide net and there's no depth to it, nobody's going to get caught in the net. Number 3, what is the problem that I'm actually solving? What are the pain points of that audience? We connect on pain first before we solve the problem. If we jump to the solution, then we're completely ignoring the pain point or the problem. And that's what's actually going to get you in the door and connect with another individual or organization. Next, what gifts do I bring? So if I understand who I'm serving and what the problem is, how do I solve that? What are the things that I every single day that I know that I'm good at? This is okay to be selfish here, people. This is not about, this is in order for, by the way, the definition of selfish decades ago was to know thyself better than anybody else. So selfish actually used to be a very positive term. We've turned it into more of a negative term. But think about knowing yourself here. What are those gifts that you bring to the table? And then finally, how am I creating that thought leadership model of it's not just enough to be an expert in something. It only is an expertise if it creates impact for other people. Otherwise, it's just an idea. It's just a skill. So what is the impact that I'm trying to create? Is it how many people that am I affecting? How many new initiatives am I launching? How many lives am I changing? Think about impact from a very, very different perspective. This is that social responsibility. ESG is going to be so powerful to do. And yes, I agree, governance comes huge into play here. But think about if we look at governance from this perspective too, how governance could be changed in the conversation that we have if we change the approach. So I want you to answer those 5 questions, and I want you to be able to have, some time to think about it, because go ahead next, Alyssa, to the next one. These are what the 5 things are going to help. Right. This is pushing yourself to write something very succinctly. This is a challenging thing to do. Some of you have already done this, and sometimes it's okay to refine it. And maybe you learn something a little bit more today, even as we go through all of the talks and the conversations, that maybe you might want to change it as ESG becomes more part of what we do. This, I help who? Who is that audience, that tribe that you're serving? Get as detailed and narrow as possible. 2, and think about what that gift is. What is that solution that you bring to the table? But it's not enough to end there. If they enjoy your gift and benefit from your gift, what is the outcome, that mission that's serving the greater good? That's where the impact comes into play, right? So here's a perfect example. I help financial leaders to break down barriers so they can grow and build for the future. Very straightforward. It doesn't matter who that person is talking to, doesn't matter what role that they play, that statement will never change. So think about that for yourself. I constantly tweak my statement for the last few years now. So I help entrepreneurs turn their stories into purpose-driven businesses so they can create more impact in everything they do. So think about what that statement looks like for you. All right, so that's going to be your big challenge. Okay, let's move on to the next one. All right, here's another thing I want you to think about. Signature topics. Now we think of not just about those that are public speakers by trade, or they do a lot of speaking. Signature topics are basically areas of thought leadership that you excel in. So think about those areas of acceleration that you can own individually for yourself. Maybe it is an E, an S, a G, or a T. Maybe it's a combination of all of them. But think about those signature ideas that you own and look at it from 3 different perspectives. 1, is it reframe? So it's just looking at it from a slightly different perspective. 2, are you looking at a paradigm and challenging its existence because maybe it's too antiquated? Maybe it needs to change. Maybe it's so outdated that it's no longer serving the incoming generation. And 3, just like a blue ocean strategy, maybe you need to deal with it completely and start over from scratch and create an entrepreneurial concept or idea around building. So think about the way with those topics specifically, look at those paradigm shifts, right? All right, let's go to the next one. So in developing your signature topics, and like I said, you don't have to be a speaker to do this. Think about those times when you're asked to speak for 5 minutes at a team meeting, or you have 5 minutes in front of the executive team and you want to talk about something. How many times have we said, oh, I don't know what to talk about? about this, and then we completely catastrophize the whole thing to a point where it takes us an hour to think about one thing, when if you already know your signature topics, it won't be a problem. You just pick from one of the three and move forward. So what I like to look at topics is in three different ways. Two that are more industry driven and one that's a little bit more personally driven. So that first one could be, what are some of the experiences that specifically that can help inspire others, whether it's around your career, leadership, what are some of those stories? The next topic, what are some innovations within the industry that could create impact? That's more industry related and more innovation related from that perspective. And then three, what are some of your personal passions or experiences that can affect change? I know there are a lot of those personal stories that we hear so much about. I will tell you recently, I worked with a woman who was really, really disconnected with her team, and she ran a team of 8 people. There was some real trouble with productivity, relationships, dynamics, all of those things, to a point where no one really wanted to work on the team. And she reframed the way in which they gathered every week for the weekly meeting. And she started off by saying, I'm going to tell you a story. And she got up there for 5 minutes and told a very powerful story, to the point where there was another woman in the audience on the team who started to cry because they shared the exact same story that was anchored in some drama, but it was very, very connected to leadership style and connecting with others and putting a team together. So for the next 8 weeks, each team member got up at the very beginning of that meeting for 5 minutes, story of what's one thing that influenced you over the last 20 to 25 years. Very powerful to think about what those topics might look like on the personal side that can help drive conversation around your professional world. All right, let's move on to the next one. So think about your 3 signature topics. So you've got 2 assignments. One is to look at that purpose-driven statement. Who is it that you're serving? What are those people that you're bringing to the table, and what are they going to benefit from it? So work on what that looks like. And then from that, what are 3 signature topics that you can own that become your area of thought leadership that's going to create impact for you, your industry, your team, your organization, as a founder, whatever you are? What are those 3 signature topics that are going to affect change and impact in your environment? All right, next. All right, finally, I'm going to end on this. So if you can take a picture of this on your screen, and maybe we'll also put this out in the digital space for you to take a look at, the network. Think about your narrative from these 6 steps. This will be the last thing I say today, so we can move on. This formula, these steps can be used for anything that you do. Sorry, Alyssa, can you go back? I haven't memorized them that well yet, Alyssa. That first one, that moment of engagement, catch them with a story, a quote, a saying, an experience, whatever it is, hook them emotionally first. That first 30 seconds determines the next 30 minutes. Unveil your idea sooner rather than later. If you leave them guessing, they'll become disinterested. If you tell them what you're going to talk about, they're going to want to know more on how you got there. So don't be afraid. Third, what's that deep personal connection? How are you connected to the topic? It may be part of your moment of engagement, but why are you so passionate about it? That comes back to the thought leadership initiative. Idea reinforcement. What are the numbers, the research, the proven data points that help create evidentiary, evidence that this idea needs to be heard? 5 is the impact of adoption. What happens? What does success look like if this idea goes to market? And finally, number 6, you can call it a call to action, but I call it an invitation to join. This is moving away from me and into we. Allow and invite somebody into your idea. Don't just speak or tell, share. When you share something, they want to feel a part of. When you tell someone, they don't feel connected to it. When you think about a party, the reason the RSVP works so well is you make people feel as though that they are to be a part of that community. This is your RSVP when you ask them to join your movement, your idea, be part of the conversation. So with that note, let's go to the last slide. So please think about your next steps. Find that purpose-driven statement, use that same formula, develop those 3 signature topics. I know they're in you. I know they're there. And then design your new narrative. Use ESG as a springboard. You might tell your story a little bit differently and how you show up every single day to your group. So thank you for the time. I hope this was helpful, and let's keep going.
That was fantastic, Tucker. I always learn something from this. I just can't appreciate you enough. I love that opening thing. That was just a little heart opener for everybody to get connected. So thanks for that. Thank you so much for reminding us of all those great things.